November 1994, Los Angeles. Whitney Houston was preparing for what would be the most lucrative private concert of her career. A tech billionaire had paid $2 million for an exclusive performance at his daughter's wedding. Everything was arranged, the stage was built, the orchestra was ready, and 500 of the world's wealthiest people were gathering at a Beverly Hills estate. But then Whitney's assistant handed her a phone. On the other end was a hospice nurse from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center with an impossible request. A dying woman had one final wish, and she was asking for Whitney Houston. What Whitney did next cost her $2 million, shocked her entire team, and proved that some things matter more than money or fame. But the real story isn't about what Whitney sacrificed that night. It's about what happened in that hospice room that left doctors, nurses, and medical professionals questioning everything they thought they knew about the power of human connection. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. And in November 1994, she was 42 years old with less than 72 hours to live. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer had ravaged her body over 18 brutal months, and now she lay in a hospice room at Cedars-Sinai. Her family gathered around her bed, waiting for the inevitable. Sarah had been a music teacher for 20 years at an inner-city Los Angeles elementary school. She had dedicated her life to bringing music education to children who otherwise would never have had access to it. She taught kids who came from broken homes, dangerous neighborhoods, and circumstances that would have crushed most adults. And through it all, Sarah had one constant source of strength: Whitney Houston's voice. Sarah had discovered Whitney's music in 1985 when she heard "Saving All My Love for You" on the radio during a particularly difficult day. She had just learned that her school's music program was being cut due to budget constraints, and she was sitting in her car crying, wondering if she should just give up teaching altogether. Then Whitney's voice came through the speakers, and something shifted inside Sarah. The power, the emotion, the absolute conviction in Whitney's singing reminded Sarah why music mattered, why she mattered. From that moment on, Whitney Houston became more than just a singer to Sarah Mitchell. She became a symbol of possibility, of beauty existing even in difficult circumstances, of voices that refused to be silenced. Sarah bought every Whitney album, attended 3 concerts, and most importantly, she used Whitney's music to reach children who had given up on school, on themselves, on life. When kids were acting out or shutting down, Miss Mitchell would put on Whitney, recalled Marcus Thompson, one of Sarah's former students who later became a social worker. She would say, "Listen to that voice. That's what's possible when you refuse to let the world tell you who you are." That voice came from a little girl in New Jersey who decided she was going to be extraordinary. And so can you. Over 20 years, Sarah Mitchell had used Whitney Houston's music to reach thousands of children. She had documentation of over 300 students who credited her music program with keeping them in school, away from gangs and on paths toward productive lives. The walls of her classroom were covered with photos of former students who had gone on to college, to careers, to futures they never thought possible. And in almost every photo, somewhere in the background was a Whitney Houston poster. When Sarah was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in May 1993, she approached her illness the same way she had approached teaching, with determination, grace, and Whitney Houston's music playing in her hospital room. Through surgery, through chemotherapy, through radiation, through every painful treatment and devastating setback, Whitney's voice was there. But by November 1994, the doctors had exhausted every option. The cancer had spread throughout her body, and Sarah was moved to hospice care for her final days. Sarah's daughter, Jennifer Mitchell, was 20 years old and watching her mother die. She had seen Sarah's strength through 18 months of brutal treatment, but she had also seen something else, a sadness that went beyond physical pain. "My mother never asked for anything for herself," Jennifer later explained in an interview with People magazine. "Even when she was dying, she was more concerned about everyone else. But there was one thing I knew she wanted, even though she would never say it. She wanted to meet Whitney Houston." Jennifer knew it was impossible. Whitney Houston was one of the biggest stars in the world. She had just released the Bodyguard soundtrack, which had become the best-selling album of all time. She was filming movies, performing for presidents, living a life so far removed from a hospice room that the two worlds seemed to exist in different universes. But Jennifer also knew her mother had maybe 3 days left to live, and if there was any chance, any possibility at all, she had to try. Jennifer started by calling Whitney's record label. She was transferred 7 times before reaching a sympathetic assistant who listened to her story and promised to pass along the message. Jennifer called Whitney's management company and was told that Whitney received thousands of requests every day and that they couldn't accommodate personal meetings. Jennifer tried Whitney's publicist, her agent, her touring company. Every door closed. Then Jennifer did something desperate. She called every major hospital in Los Angeles and asked if they had any connections to Whitney Houston. Most hung up on her. But at Cedars-Sinai, she reached a nurse named Patricia Rodriguez who listened to the entire story. Patricia had a daughter who was a music teacher, and Sarah's story resonated deeply with her. "I don't know if I can help," Patricia told Jennifer, "but let me see what I can do." What Jennifer didn't know was that Patricia Rodriguez had once been assigned to care for Bobby Brown's mother during a hospital stay, and she had met Whitney briefly during that time. It was a tenuous connection at best, but Patricia had kept Whitney's assistant's phone number from that encounter. On November 18, 1994, Patricia made a call she had no business making to a number she probably shouldn't have kept, and somehow, miraculously, she got through. The call came through to Denise Williams, Whitney Houston's personal assistant, at exactly 2:47 p.m. on November 18th. Denise almost didn't answer. It was an unknown number, and Whitney's team had strict protocols about phone security. But something made her pick up, and on the other end was Patricia Rodriguez, a nurse she vaguely remembered from a hospital visit 2 years earlier. Patricia explained Sarah Mitchell's situation, and as she talked, Denise found herself crying. She had worked for Whitney for 5 years and had witnessed countless fan requests, charitable asks, and impossible demands. But something about this story, about a dying music teacher who had used Whitney's voice to save thousands of children, struck her as different. "I'll talk to Whitney," Denise promised. "But you need to understand, she has a massive commitment tonight, a private concert that's been planned for months. She probably can't do this." Patricia understood, but she also knew that Sarah Mitchell didn't have months. She had days, maybe hours. "Just ask her," Patricia said. "That's all I can hope for." When Denise approached Whitney with the request later that afternoon, Whitney was in the middle of preparing for the evening's performance. Hair and makeup artists surrounded her. Choreographers were running through final details, and the pressure of the $2 million concert was weighing heavily on everyone. Denise almost didn't bring it up, but she thought about Sarah Mitchell lying in a hospice bed and decided she had to try. "Whitney, I got a call today," Denise began carefully. Whitney was looking at herself in the mirror, adjusting her hair, only half listening. "She's dying, and she's a music teacher who has used your songs to help thousands of kids. She's asking if there's any way you could maybe call her or send a message." Whitney turned away from the mirror, her expression shifting from distracted to focused. "When?" she asked. "When does she want this?" Denise hesitated. "She's dying, Whitney. Like right now. Days, maybe hours." The room went quiet. The hairstylist stopped mid-curl. The makeup artist froze with a brush in the air. Everyone understood what was being asked, and everyone understood what it would cost. "Tonight," Whitney said, not as a question, but as a statement. "She wants this tonight." Denise nodded. "Tonight is the only night there might be." Whitney looked around the room at all the people who had worked so hard to prepare for the evening's performance. She looked at the dress that had been custom-made for the billionaire's daughter's wedding. She thought about the $2 million payment that would be lost if she canceled. And then she thought about a music teacher lying in a hospital bed who had spent 20 years using Whitney's voice to give children hope. "Call them," Whitney said quietly. "Tell them I'm coming." The room erupted in protest. Whitney's manager rushed in. "You can't cancel this. Do you understand how much money is at stake? How many powerful people will be offended? This could damage your career." Whitney stood up, still wearing her preparation robe, her hair half-styled, her makeup incomplete. "I don't care," she said, her voice firm but not angry. "A woman is dying. A woman who used my music to help kids. That matters more than $2 million. That matters more than offending rich people. I'm going to the hospital." What happened next became legendary in Whitney's inner circle, though it remained mostly unknown to the public for years. Whitney's team went into crisis mode. Her manager, Gene Harvey, tried everything to convince her to reconsider. "Whitney, you can go tomorrow," he pleaded. "After the concert. We'll make it happen." Whitney shook her head. "She doesn't have tomorrow." "Did you not hear the part about dying?" The phone call started immediately. The billionaire hosting the event was furious. 500 guests were already arriving. A full orchestra was in place. The caterers had prepared a feast. The stage had been built specifically for Whitney's performance. Canceling now would be a disaster, an insult, a potential career-ending move in terms of her reputation among high-paying clients. But Whitney was immovable. She called the billionaire herself and explained the situation. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know this is unprofessional. I know this costs you money and embarrassment, but there's a woman who is dying, and if I can give her one moment of peace before she goes, I have to do that. You can sue me. You can tell everyone I'm unreliable, but I'm going to that hospital." The billionaire, surprisingly, didn't sue. Years later, he told Forbes magazine, "I was angry at first. Furious, actually. But then I thought about what she was doing and why, and I realized I was watching someone choose humanity over money. You don't see that very often, especially not in entertainment." I gained more respect for Whitney Houston that night than I would have from any performance. By 6:30 p.m., Whitney was in her car heading towards Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She had changed out of her performance preparation into simple jeans and a sweater. She had removed most of her makeup. She looked nothing like Whitney Houston, the superstar. She looked like a woman going to visit a dying friend. In the hospice wing, Sarah Mitchell was fading in and out of consciousness. The pain medication was strong, and the doctors had told her family that they were entering the final hours. Jennifer sat beside her mother's bed, holding her hand, whispering about memories they had shared. She had decided not to tell her mother about the request to Whitney Houston. The disappointment would be too cruel if it didn't happen. But then Patricia Rodriguez rushed into the room, her face flushed with excitement and disbelief. "Jennifer," she whispered urgently, "Whitney Houston is in the building. She's on her way up right now." Jennifer's mouth fell open. "What? How? I thought she had that concert?" Patricia shook her head in amazement. "She canceled it. She walked away from a $2 million performance to come here." The news spread through the hospice wing like electricity. Nurses emerged from other rooms. Doctors stopped their rounds. Everyone wanted to see if it was real, if Whitney Houston was actually about to walk into their hospice unit for a dying music teacher. And then the elevator doors opened, and there she was. No entourage, no bodyguards, no photographers, just Whitney Houston in jeans and a sweater, carrying a small bag, looking nervous and human and beautiful. Whitney was quiet for a moment, and then she said something that no one expected. "Miss Mitchell, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've never told anyone publicly." Sarah looked at her with curious, tired eyes. "When I was young," Whitney continued, "there was a teacher who believed in me. Her name was Mrs. Coleman, and she taught music at my church. She was the first person who told me I had a gift, who made me believe I could actually do something with my voice. She died when I was 17, right before I got my first record deal. I never got to thank her. I never got to tell her how much she meant to me." Whitney's voice broke with emotion. "So I need to thank you, Miss Mitchell, because you did what Mrs. Coleman did. You saw potential in children who didn't see it in themselves. You gave them music when the world tried to take it away, and you used my voice to help them, which means in some small way, I gotta be part of that gift. So thank you. Thank you for letting me be part of your life's work." The room was silent except for the soft beeping of medical equipment and the sound of Jennifer crying. Sarah reached up with tremendous effort and touched Whitney's face. "Sing for me," she whispered. "Please, just once. Sing for me." Whitney nodded, unable to speak. She took a deep breath and then began to sing, a cappella, with no accompaniment, no production, just her voice in a small hospice room. She sang "Greatest Love of All," the song about believing in yourself, about children being the future, about finding strength within. As Whitney sang, something remarkable happened. Nurses from other parts of the floor began gathering outside Sarah's room. Other patients' family members came to the doorway. Everyone was quiet, respectful, but drawn to the pure beauty of Whitney Houston's voice, filling that place of sorrow with something transcendent. Sarah kept her eyes locked on Whitney throughout the entire song, tears streaming down her face, but also smiling, really smiling for the first time in weeks. When Whitney finished, the silence that followed was sacred. Sarah whispered, "That was everything. That was perfect." Whitney leaned forward and kissed Sarah's forehead gently. "You're everything," she said. "What you've done matters more than any record I've ever sold." Patricia Rodriguez, who had been a hospice nurse for 15 years and had witnessed countless deaths, later said, "I've never seen anything like it." The peace that came over Sarah's face after Whitney sang was something I can't explain medically. It was like she had been waiting to hear that voice one more time before she could let go. Whitney stayed with Sarah for another 20 minutes, just holding her hand and talking quietly. She told Sarah about her own struggles with fame, with pressure, with trying to live up to everyone's expectations. "Sometimes I forget why I sing," Whitney admitted. "The business gets so overwhelming, so political. But being here with you, seeing what my music meant to you and to those kids, that's why I sing. That's the whole point." Before leaving, Whitney did something that shocked Jennifer. She took off the simple gold necklace she was wearing, a cross that had belonged to her mother, Sissy, and placed it around Sarah's neck. "This was my mother's," Whitney said. "It always brought me comfort when I was scared or uncertain. I want you to have it now. Jennifer tried to protest, understanding how valuable and personal the necklace must be, but Whitney insisted. Some things are meant to be passed on, she said. Your mother gave music to children who needed it. Now I'm giving her something that gave me strength. It's right. As Whitney prepared to leave, Sarah, who had been drifting in and out of consciousness, suddenly gripped her hand tightly. Promise me something, Sarah whispered with surprising strength. Whitney leaned in close. Anything. Sarah's eyes were intense despite her weakness. Promise me you'll never forget that you matter. Not Whitney Houston the star. You, the person. You matter exactly as you are. Those words hit Whitney like a physical blow. In a moment when she had come to give comfort, she was receiving something she desperately needed to hear. I promise, Whitney whispered back, her voice breaking. I promise I'll remember. Whitney left the hospice wing quietly, the same way she had arrived. No fanfare, no photographs, no press coverage. Just a woman who had given up $2 million and risked her professional reputation to spend 47 minutes with a dying music teacher. In the elevator, alone for the first time since arriving, Whitney broke down completely. She cried for Sarah, for Mrs. Coleman, for all the teachers who poured their lives into children and never got proper recognition. And she cried for herself, for the reminder that beneath the fame and the pressure and the expectations, she was simply a human being who needed to be reminded that she mattered. Sarah Mitchell died peacefully 38 hours after Whitney's visit. Jennifer later told reporters that her mother's last 2 days were different from all the painful weeks before. She wasn't afraid anymore, Jennifer said. She had received the gift she needed. She had been seen and valued by someone she admired, and that gave her peace. At Sarah's funeral, over 500 people attended. Former students came from across the country. Many of them were now teachers themselves, carrying forward the gift Sarah had given them. And many of them credited Whitney Houston's music, filtered through Sarah's wisdom and love, with changing their lives. Jennifer discovered something remarkable while going through her mother's belongings. Sarah had kept detailed journals for over 20 years, documenting every student she had worked with, every challenge she had faced, every victory she had celebrated. And throughout those journals, references to Whitney Houston appeared like a thread connecting everything together. Played I Want to Dance with Somebody today for the 5th graders. 3 kids who never participate started dancing. Music is magic. Listen to Greatest Love of All on the drive to school. Needed to remember why I do this. Whitney always reminds me. The most powerful entry was from the day after Whitney's visit. Sarah, knowing she had very little time left, had dictated final thoughts to Jennifer. Whitney Houston came to see me today. The woman whose voice has been my companion for nearly a decade sat beside my bed and sang to me. But the most remarkable part wasn't her singing, though it was beautiful. It was what she said. She thanked me. Whitney Houston, one of the most talented people on earth, thanked me for using her music to help children. She made me feel like my life mattered, like the work I did wasn't small or insignificant. And then she told me that I mattered as a person, not just as a teacher. Sometimes we need permission to believe our lives have meaning. Whitney gave me that permission. Whitney attended Sarah's funeral privately, arriving early and sitting in the back. She listened to former students talk about how Miss Mitchell had saved them, how her music program had been their refuge, how she had taught them that they were worthy of beautiful things. And Whitney understood that she had been part of something far larger than record sales or concert revenues. Her voice had been a tool in the hands of an extraordinary teacher who had used it to build hope in places where hope was dying. The Sarah Mitchell Music Foundation was established 6 months after her death. Whitney Houston was the first major donor, contributing $500,000 and becoming a board member. The foundation provides music education programs in underfunded schools across Los Angeles, continuing Sarah's work of bringing music to children who need it most. Over the past 3 decades, the foundation has served over 50,000 children, many of whom have gone on to become musicians, teachers, and advocates themselves. In 2001, during an interview with Oprah Winfrey, Whitney spoke publicly for the first time about that November night in 1994. I canceled a $2 million concert to sit with a dying woman, Whitney said. And people thought I was crazy. My team thought I was making a terrible career decision. But that night, in that hospice room, I learned more about why I was given this voice than I had learned in my entire career. Sarah Mitchell showed me that success isn't about money or fame. It's about whether you use what you've been given to help other people. She used my music to save children. And by letting me be part of her final hours, she saved something in me too. Whitney kept Sarah's journal entry that mentioned their meeting. She had it framed and placed in her home recording studio. On difficult days when the pressure of fame felt overwhelming, she would read Sarah's words and remember why she sang. Sometimes we need permission to believe our lives have meaning. The entry read. Those words became Whitney's anchor during her own struggles in later years. Jennifer Mitchell, who witnessed that extraordinary night, became a music teacher herself. She took over her mother's program at the same inner-city elementary school and continued using Whitney Houston's music to reach struggling children. My mother taught me that one voice can change everything, Jennifer said. Whitney Houston's voice changed my mother's life, and through her, changed thousands of children's lives. And my mother's dying wish changed Whitney's perspective on her own purpose. That's the power of human connection. That's what happens when we choose people over money, compassion over convenience. The story of Whitney's hospice visit remained relatively unknown for years, shared only among those who were there and those directly impacted by Sarah Mitchell's work. But after Whitney's own death in 2012, Jennifer finally told the complete story in a tribute article. The world knew Whitney Houston, the superstar, Jennifer wrote, but I knew Whitney Houston, the woman who gave up $2 million to sing to my dying mother. That's the Whitney I want people to remember. The one who understood that fame means nothing if you don't use it to make someone's final moments a little less frightening and a little more filled with beauty. This incredible story reminds us that our greatest moments aren't the ones captured by cameras or celebrated by crowds. They're the quiet moments when we choose humanity over opportunity, when we sacrifice our own interests to ease someone else's pain, when we recognize that every life has profound value regardless of fame or fortune. Whitney Houston walked away from $2 million and risked her professional reputation to spend 47 minutes with a dying music teacher. And in doing so, she received a gift far more valuable than any paycheck. She was reminded of her purpose, reconnected with her humanity, and became part of a legacy that extended far beyond entertainment into the realm of genuine human transformation. What would you sacrifice to ease someone's suffering? How can we all be more willing to recognize that some moments matter more than money? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to remember that every act of compassion creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Subscribe and ring that notification bell because we have more powerful stories that prove love, sacrifice, and human connection are the most valuable currencies in the world. Until next time, remember that you never know when the most important moment of your life will arrive, and when it does, choose love over everything else.